Hello and welcome to episode 531 of the official EstablishTheRun.com podcast. My name is Adam Levitan, and today we have a very, very special guest, a young man who has been the face of poker for 2 decades. He's won in the cash streets. He's won in the tournaments. He's won in the YouTube streets. He's grinding fitness. He's everywhere. It is, of course, Daniel Negreanu. Daniel, thanks for doing the pod. How's it going?
Appreciate the young man intro. Right? Because, I go by Kid Poker because Kid Rock's like 60 now? He's still Kid Rock. I mean, I feel like I can keep the tag for a while.
Exactly. I have not changed my profile picture since I was about 24 years old, and I'm 40 now. So I'm going down with the ship.
Yeah.
Just like you. Okay. I know a lot of people ask me, hey, how did Daniel cross paths here? How did Daniel find this podcast? Shout out to Christian Sanchez, who I believe is Daniel's golf coach. Christian is a friend/listener of the show. He's a fantasy football grinder. He set this up. Daniel, however, though, I don't think is a fantasy football player. Can correct me if I'm wrong there. However, I do know that Daniel's a serious fantasy hockey player. What's going on with your fantasy acumen these days, Daniel? Where are you at in the fantasy world?
Well, first and foremost on Christian, he's not just my golf coach. He's an all-around athlete. He runs my YouTube channel, videos. I mean, he does a lot of stuff. He's not just the golf guy. He used to be just the golf guy, and then we started to put more and more responsibility on him. As far as football goes, fantasy football, at the very beginning of fantasy football, I was very, very into it because I come from a fantasy background. I've been in the same fantasy hockey league since 1996. Before fantasy was even a thing, we created a league that is like no other, and it's still the same group that I'm in from 1996. So, like, there's 20 guys, and we've had maybe 3 or 4 turnover in all that time. But yeah, sort of football tilted me one year, I remember. And I just stopped watching NFL outside of the Buffalo Bills. I grew up a big Buffalo Bills fan, diehard hockey fan. And I just found that a lot of stuff the NFL was doing was really pissing me off. So I stopped watching, which is crazy because I enjoyed the sport. I just stopped caring that much.
Yeah, well, that's a Canadian point of view, right? You grew up in Canada where I assume there was people following the CFL and betting on the CFL and playing fantasy CFL, or am I wrong? Or were you guys following NFL more than CFL?
It's funny you mentioned CFL because a guy named Geraldo Vulgaris, who many of you will know from his time with the Dallas Mavericks and whatnot, he sort of created his bankroll betting on the CFL. There wasn't a lot of action on it. But I still think I grew up in Toronto. CFL was kind of an afterthought. People watched the NFL. CFL, no one cared. It was 8 teams. 2 of them had the same name. I mean, 8-team league. You had the Ottawa Rough Riders and the Saskatchewan Rough Riders. I'm like, really? Really, guys? You can't think of anything else? Like, and I don't know. I don't pay attention to the CFL. I never really did all that much. I did like the Argos a little bit. But no, even to Toronto, like Toronto could support an NFL franchise easily.
Sure. I'm sure you were aware of DFS, Daily Fantasy Sports, when it first started to get popular. It was like 2013, 2014, 2015. It was, when you were in poker at that time, it was like unavoidable to come across people talking about DFS. You might remember Aaron Jones, A.E. Jones from back in the day. He won the biggest prize ever in DFS. I believe it was $5 million back in 2015. But a bunch of guys, not just Aaron, a bunch of guys left poker to concentrate on DFS. I don't remember you ever playing. I could be wrong. Or what are your memories of the DFS kind of boom hitting around 2015?
Yeah. Well, yeah, I obviously don't play in Nevada because it's illegal.
Yeah.
You can't gamble on sports in Nevada. Okay, whatever. But you're absolutely right. Obviously when, at the very beginning, when this sort of became a thing, you saw a lot of poker players that, they delve into numbers and statistics and things like that. And that's what they did with online poker. So it was a natural progression for them to now ruin fantasy sports. It's essentially what they did in a lot of ways, right? It's just true. I'm being honest, right? So anytime you have like Sharpies like they are, and when I think that, I don't know if it's changed, but there was an unlimited number of entries they could enter into these things, and they could optimize lineups better than anybody else. So like, your average weekend warrior is like, I'll put $20 and he's drawn dead. Like, he may win occasionally, right? But in the long run, he's going to be losing, and the Sharpies are going to scoop up all the money. So that was unfortunate. But I never got deep into it because I don't do it for the money. Like, I love my fantasy hockey league more than anything in the world, and it's about pride. And sure. I'm in my playoffs right now, and I'm losing my mind because too much fun.
Yeah, now there is a cap of 150. But what you said about how sharps interact with a general ecosystem of a peer-to-peer gambling game. It's so similar to poker, and I think that's why a lot of poker guys left. Anytime you have a peer-to-peer skill game, like there's going to be people that find edges and there's going to be people that get left behind. I do want to ask you about some of that poker stuff in a second here, but I guess you've never been tempted, right? I've made the drive from Vegas to Prim. I'm sure you're familiar with Prim. It's the first stop over the border in California, just to register. I feel like you would enjoy daily fantasy hockey. Maybe I'm wrong, but I'd love to see you get in there and battle.
Oh, no, I did it in the outset. I mean, I was doing some fantasy hockey, and I was doing pretty well. This was before a lot of the guys, came in to kill. But again, I wasn't doing it. There wasn't huge money. I was doing it just kind of like for fun. But the thing is, I just have so many sweats of my own, like with my own fantasy stuff. So every morning I wake up, and the first thing I do is I have a feed on Twitter. For those of you that don't have lists on Twitter, highly recommend. You can formulate, and you can pin them at the top, right? So you make your lists, and then instead of like, on the top, looking at that for you, which is designed to make you angry. Yeah. That's all it's there for. It's like, ooh, what can piss you off today? So instead of that, I just see fantasy hockey, Vegas Golden Knights, and I can click on all those. So I spend about an hour just on every single angle of like fantasy hockey that I can, for the day. And then I, pretty much spend most of the day making sure that all my lineups are good.
Could not agree more about lists on Twitter, especially with the way things have gone the last few months with Twitter. The For You thing, you're just asking for trouble when you're on the For You. Couldn't agree more about lists. Great advice. Anyways, I'm really into these fitness sports bets. You mentioned Christian was your golf coach. I assume you hired him because you were playing some prop bets, some side bets. There's been some legendary stuff written and discussed about some of these high stakes Vegas golf things. I'd love to hear some stories if you have any, mostly because these sports fitness bets are like my favorite thing to do. You have no idea what I'm talking about, but I played a tennis match. I had my racket. I played a professional tennis player who had a frying pan. I've played Brandon Adams in a bunch of tennis matches, which have been great fun. What about golf? Why hire Christian? Any stories that you can tell the people from the prop betting golf days?
Oh, I got a nice Brandon Adams golf story too that I played with him. But before I get to that, so when I met Christian, before I did, I was down probably 2-3 million golfing. Just had no chance. Like every time I played with somebody, say, "What do you shoot?" I said, "I'm a bogey golfer," which is about around 90. And they'd shoot a 75 and say, "Best round of my life." And I'm like, holy fuck, that's 3 times in a row I played with a guy and he had the best round of his life. I bring out the best in people, huh? So I ran into a lot of the hustlers. And again, I suck. And one of the biggest drawbacks of being really bad at golf is like when something goes wrong and you're dead, right? Because you don't know how to fix it. Like, I don't know. Oh, it's my grip. It's something like that. So I noticed a lot of other guys had somebody, a buddy of ours, Eric Lindgren, said, "You should work with Christian on this little thing that I was doing." And I said, okay. And, the first thing he did was took me to the range and he's like, "All right, we need to fix your grip, get your posture right." Simple stuff, right? But stuff that's like, whoa, mind blowing. And then, I started, I hired him full time for all my golf matches and stuff. And he was instrumental in one big golf bet that I made, which was a silly golf bet. At the time, I was still terrible. I couldn't break 100. And playing $1 million matches. 100. But then we were drinking. Me, a couple guys were drinking late at night. And so for some reason, it comes up that the back tees at TPC Summerlin, I play the front tees. So you're talking about 6,300 yards versus about 7,000, which not good for a guy who hits it 220 when he nails it, right, off the tee. So I make a bet that I can shoot 80 from the back tees, and I have a year to do it. Okay, well, for 3 months, I traveled to Europe. I had a couple other things going. All of a sudden, we're 4 weeks out, and I haven't really played. So that 4 weeks was 7 a.m. wake up, practice for an hour, play 18. Don't eat lunch, nothing like that. Eat on the course. Practice another hour, another 18. Another hour practice, another 9. So then practice till dark. So 8, 9 p.m. And so, all of a sudden, we're in the 90s, and then we're starting to, creep up in the mid 80s really quickly. And the last round was just epic. I mean, it's a long story. I'll keep it as short as I can, where I was 2 under through 7 somehow, right? And this is I can't hit greens. I don't hit the greens because they're too far. I'm driver, 3 wood, chip and putt, right? But I'm very good at chipping and putting, clearly. So with 4 holes to go, an easy one followed by the last 3 tough holes, I have to just bogey out all 4 holes. I double the first one, of course, right? I make a huge, now I need to make a par on one of the tough 3 ones. I make a 25-foot snake putt to make par. And then the last 2 holes were identical. It was crazy. Driver, 3 wood, perfect. And chipping, which is my bread and butter, shank it. Nice. Now I have a 100-foot 2 putt. hit it 6 feet past the hole, make the comebacker. The last one, there's 70 carts, like everyone in the thing. I bet 550,000 on this one. So I remember, like, it was a 6-footer. I did the same thing, pulled the chip, 100 yards, and now I'm 6 feet past the hole. I'm a good putter, but my putting stroke, for those that can see, I went like this, and I fell down.
Oh no!
As the putt, and it starts to go to the right, but somehow the golf gods trickled it back in, and it went in. So I shot the 80, which was pretty insane. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the one thing about two things I'd say about playing golf bets is it's really hard to get a handicap. Like you said, somebody can say anything on their handicap. How do you verify it? And there's a lot of scumbags out there, especially when you're playing for a lot of money. That's number one. Number two, it strikes me that even if you get the handicaps perfectly correct, the player who's better is always going to have an advantage. His range of outcomes is smaller, right? Like you might be able to shoot 75 one day, but a way bigger portion of your outcome is worse. So I don't know. I always feel like it always ends up favoring the better player, which is always not me. So yeah, I try to avoid the golf betting streets. But I hear it sounds like fun.
I disagree completely with what you just said. And I'll tell you why. Okay, because I mean, what you said makes sense, right? Mm-hmm. From a logical perspective. But here's the issue, right? So what do you shoot? What do you normally? You're good?
I'm terrible. Like over 100 for sure.
Okay, so a guy like that's a scratch golfer. He's going to shoot between 70 and 74, right? Yep. So you're going to match up to that. There's not much he can do, right? So let's say you're getting a stroke a hole, because it's important how you match up. If you're just doing it based on number of strokes and betting like $5,000 per stroke, yeah, I agree. The good golfer. But if you're just betting by hole and you're giving a guy a stroke a hole, this guy who's going to shoot 100, if he shoots 90, he's going to destroy the good play, because there is so much variance, right? And the thing is when he makes an 11 or a 12 on a hole, it doesn't burn you that bad. You just lose the hole. It's no big deal. But if he does have a string of like 7 or 8 that, pars or bogeys, there's nothing the pro can do.
Sure. Yeah, I get that. I always manage to lose, but it is what it is. We actually got a question from the Pit Boss. He said, what's the most Daniel's wagered on round of golf, and what's his handicap? I don't know if Daniel's playing anymore. Are you playing anymore, Daniel? Is there still good action in the golf streets out there in Vegas? And yeah, if you would care to comment, they want to know what's the most you've ever wagered on a round of golf.
Yeah. So it's an interesting question because we haven't golfed in like 2 years, but I'm going to get out once. The weather's been terrible. Yeah. But I plan on getting back out there. As far as the handicap thing too, because you sort of mentioned this, like I have a handicap. Like I actually would do it properly. But everybody else who's a gambler, you say, what's your handicap? They say, I'm about a 12. And how they do it in their head is, well, they shoot about 84 on average, right? That's their average score. And they say that's their handicap. But as you know, as those that golf know, that's not how handicaps are calculated. You take your last 20 scores and you take the average of your 10 best, right? So they're not a 12. They're like an 8 or, it's something like that. So you can't match up with guys like that. But the biggest bets that I had were scramble matches. And Christian, this is crazy because this is like the first week I started working with Christian, and he thought he was going to be fired after this round, for sure. Like this is a guy, he's a good golfer, right? But this is a lot of pressure for a new boss, and you're playing 20,000 a hole, right? Against a twosome. So it was our score combined against these other two, and I'm playing great. I'm playing from the up tees. I shoot like an amazing round, 81 for me. Okay, Christian is supposed to shoot about 70. He shoots about an 80.
Oh, no.
He's like, I'm fired. Luckily, we actually ended up winning because of my score. But after that, then we started doing these huge scramble matches. It was 4 of us against Patrick Antonius and a few others. And we had these bets where, in these scrambles, you're going to shoot between 56 and 61 kind of thing. So really, really good. And we had 4 of us. They had 3. And I think they misjudged how valuable having 4 putts are, especially when we had 4 guys on our team that could all putt. They had 3 guys. One was an ace. He was the best player by far. He's better than Christian for sure. And, but he was the only one that was really good at putting. So we won a couple million back-to-back years doing that.
Perfect. All right. I want to get to poker. I've heard your poker origin story, which honestly sounds a little bit similar to mine. I also started my quote-unquote career. I use that term very loosely, but playing 6-12 and 10-20 limit hold'em. I was at Borgata. I think you started up in Canada playing a limit hold'em. You went on to be rich and famous. I went on to do fantasy football videos for my Honda Pilot on Friday night. But nevertheless, I remember when cash games started because I was already playing poker at the time in Atlantic City. And when no limit cash games first started, this did not exist. This was like something weird out of the blue. And I was actually stupidly really stubborn about it. I thought these were just idiot kids with sunglasses. The game played so slow. I could make more and I could enjoy myself more. Playing Limit Hold'em turned out to be like one of the worst takes of all time, and I rectified it relatively quickly. But what do you remember about the transformation from Limit to No Limit? Because I don't encounter too many people these days anymore who started their career playing Limit Hold'em. It's like you tell someone that, they think you're, a dead dinosaur or something like that.
Yeah. But lucky for me, like back then, just like you, Limit Hold'em was my job. 10-20 Limit Hold'em, Monday to Friday, noon to 8, 40-hour weeks, making about 40, 45 bucks an hour. Okay. That was the job. The good news for me was, even before No Limit Hold'em cash games became a thing, there were tournaments, and a lot of them were no limit. So on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesdays, I was out there playing these $20 tournaments, getting a lot of experience in no limit, so that by the time I was 21, and more, no limit was happening, I was well suited for it, right? But you're right. I cut my teeth on limit. People don't realize this, but Limit Hold'em was always the biggest tournament at the World Series of Poker and others.
Yeah.
Like I won a tournament. I just posted a Instagram post. It was like 1997. It was $100 buy-in, $100. Okay, Limit Hold'em. I won 14,000. Like that's a lot of buy-ins.
Yeah, that was the game back then. Everybody just played Limit Hold'em. That was the game for sure. Do you play cash anymore? Everybody sees you in the tournament streets. Everybody sees you at the World Series playing this insane schedule, going everywhere for tournaments. Do you play cash anymore? Do you have any desire to play cash anymore? Because I mean, for some of us who grew up playing cash, it's kind of hard to move away from. You seem like you've kind of honed in mostly on tournaments.
So here's the thing, right? Imagine you're me for now, right? And so what is the goal of playing cash? Make money, right?
For sure.
What if you don't give a fuck about money?
How rich?
What if you don't give a fuck? I'm serious. What if you don't give a fuck about money?
Yeah.
How boring is that? Right? Because that's like a job, Tournaments are fun. There's leaderboards and point systems and trophies and wins. So for me, that excites me. Occasionally I'll play in one of these streams here locally, and play some cash or whatever. But but I truly, and this is going to sound crazy to people, even when I didn't have any, everyone's like, oh, because you're rich, you don't care about money. I didn't care about money when I didn't have it. I just wanted to get good. I wanted to win. And I think there's like a underlying lesson in that. A lot of people and they tell me they want to do something. I'm like, if they say the reason is just because they want to get rich, then they're less likely to be successful than someone who says, I love it. I love doing it. I want to be an actor. Why? Because I want to be rich and famous. Okay. But do you love acting? No, I mean, I just want to do it because it's an avenue. No, you're probably not. If you don't love the craft and you don't just love it, then you won't be successful. And I never cared about the money, which is partly why I think I sort of lived from a mindset of like abundance rather than scarcity, if that makes sense.
Sure. Yeah. And I mean, people say it all the time. It's hard to internalize it. If you're thinking about your chips on the table as actual money, you're going to have a way harder time than people who look at the chips as a game and you're trying to get to the top of the leaderboard, like Daniel said. I'm curious what advice you would have for people these days in terms of game selection. I think it's pretty clear that no limit, mid stakes, cash is very, very difficult game to beat these days, and obviously probably high stakes as well, unless you get in certain games. Tournaments are much softer, but there's gonna be so much variance there. If someone was just starting in poker, what would your game selection kind of outlook for them be like?
So let's say, for example, I'm broke, and I've actually fantasized about this because it's kind of fun. Like, let's say I only had like $5,000 and that's it. I would personally peruse the poker rooms, the live poker rooms in Las Vegas. Online poker, as you said, there's some Sharpies and, some tough players to play in at the high stakes. So I think you'll find the softest berry patches are going to be like Friday, Saturday nights in Las Vegas. These one to three, $2 $5 games that are no limit. And, the thing about, which was surprising for me, between Limit Hold'em and no limit is Limit Hold'em, weak players, bad players are going to win a reasonable amount of time. Like you're just going to catch. Even if they play with their cards face up, they're still going to win, right? With no limit, in a relatively tough game, they're almost never going to win. So they're just going to lose most of the time because you have so much more control in no limit. So if you were on an upstart bankroll type thing, I would play no limit cash as a job, right? And then look to supplement here and there by some free rolls or looking to, play some tournaments like GG Poker. We just had a tournament right now. No joke. We guaranteed $10 million, and this is for $150 buy-in, which is just really dumb. And I told them there's no way that's going to fucking hit. And they're like, yeah, we know, probably won't hit. So I put my neck out on the line, and I said, I'll guarantee that there's at least $1 million overlay, and if not, I'll put up the $1 million. Okay, that just finished today, and I was skin of my teeth. The overlay was like 1,024,000. You had a $9 million prize pool for $150 buy-in. So if you're an up-and-comer looking for spots like that, looking for these huge guarantees and things like that online, that's definitely worthwhile. And, other than that, just playing like live cash.
Yeah. You mentioned live cash, no limit. It strikes me that a lot of the games, and I don't play that much poker anymore, but it strikes me that a lot of the games now look the softest to me, at least, are PLO or mixed games. It's just harder, I think, to learn some of those games. And so new people now are almost exclusively trying to get better at no limit. My thought was maybe no limit isn't the answer if I was just starting now. Maybe some of these other kind of variants of games. Any thoughts there?
Absolutely. Well, I love mixed games. Absolutely freaking love all the mixed games. And PLO, I enjoy that too. I'm actually going to be playing in a PLO exclusive series next week at the Poker Go studio, which is going to be a lot of fun for those PLO players. Come on down. Buy-ins are like 10, 25,000, whatever. But you can come gamble. But as for PLO, the one thing you'd have to ask yourself is how comfortable are you with like extreme amounts of variance?
Yeah.
Because PLO is different than Hold'em. Remember when I said Hold'em is a game where you'll have control? So you kind of, have PLO, you're going to have streaks where you're like, holy shit, I just lost 15 buy-ins in a row and there's nothing I could do, because the equities run closer. Let's say you have a beautiful PLO hand. For those that don't know, something like ace, ace, king, queen with 2 hearts and 2 spades. That's a monster fucking hand, right? Yeah. Well, if a guy's playing a jack, 8, 7, and a 4, you're only like 60-40.
I know.
Pre-flop, right? So there's a lot more decisions being made after the flop. And when equities are close, that increases variance. So that's dangerous for people. Mixed games, the struggle for mixed games is, and I love them, is that it's hard to find low limit mixed games.
Yeah.
So you'd have to like be somebody who's financially okay to play in some higher stakes stuff.
Yeah, for sure. Okay. I want to ask about being an ambassador. So you were obviously famously one of the faces of Poker Stars. It can be really hard, right? And like this whole ambassador thing, I think is nuanced and deserves a better conversation than what it gets on Twitter with people dunking on each other. I was a brand ambassador for DraftKings. I had no fucking idea what was going on behind the scenes. I was not involved in any decision-making whatsoever. You took a lot of heat from the poker community when the Supernova Elite program got canceled in this, dirty way. I never thought that like, oh, Daniel pulled the plug on this. Like, cause I know like DraftKings never asked me about any business decision whatsoever. Any reflections on that whole thing? I know now you're representing GG Poker. Any thoughts on the whole brand ambassador thing?
Yeah, for sure. I'm, obviously, as you said, I'm with GG Poker now and like super happy with how that all rolled out because I wasn't planning on doing any other ambassadorships. I was going to just sail off into the sunset. They came to me with like this epic software and I just liked the guys and had a lot of trust, which is where, trust is an important aspect when you do this, right? Because as you said, you're not you're not like involved in every single decision just because you're an ambassador, right? So you have a lot of trust. And when, Stars was run by Isai Scheinberg, the trust was there. And then he sold and, now there's a new company involved and they have different goals and stuff like that. So then they spring this one on me and I'm like, this is brutal. This is going to destroy your brand forever. And I was on the phone with David Bazoff, who was part of the Maya group who took it over daily, trying to explain to him. I was like, listen, I agree 1,000,000,000% that the system you have is doomed to fail. And I said so before. And what I'm talking about is a system where it was a rewards program system that benefited people who would play 30, 40 games at a time and just fold, right? You just do that, like, play super tight, only play pocket aces, and you might make 15, 20,000 a year. I said, this is going to cannibalize all the games and it's going to destroy it. When you're starting out a site, that stuff makes sense because you need bodies, right? But then what happens is it starts to eat itself. So I knew that was a problem. The issue was, as you mentioned, they wanted to cut it out immediately, but there were people that played all year with the incentive of saying, if you reach this status in year A, in year B, you will receive these benefits. And now in November, you're telling people, yeah, we're no longer doing that. Holy shit. I mean, listen, I know this is legal. Airlines do it all the time. They screw with your air miles and stuff. But guess what? People hate the airlines for that reason, right? So I was in a tough spot. I mean, every single day, I'm not kidding, 4 to 6 hours a day, I was on the phone with him. And I would get him sometimes to a point where he said yes, right? He was like, yep, okay, we'll delay it. And then his people internally would come back. How about this? How about this? I'm like, oh my God, here we go. Right? And so, because what I was saying is, all right, you can still make this move, right? But honor what you said you would to these people.
The people grinded for 10 months, yeah.
Right. And there was some language in a tweet or in some messaging like in early the year, they said they might make some tweaks to it, but on the website, it flat out said, do this, you get this, right? And you got to honor that. So that was super disappointing for me. And obviously, like you said, I took a lot of flack. And that's part of what being an ambassador is. They look at you as the face and they're like, you're representing these people that are doing bad things. And I'm like, You're right. This is brutal. But there's also the other added aspect of when you work for a company, you're not going to like or agree with everything that they do. It's just not possible. Like you work at Kmart, wherever it is, sure there's some things where they're charging double for this or that you're not going to love, right? So yeah, that was probably the most difficult time for me as like in any sort of ambassadorial role, because I knew what they were doing was wrong, right? And I wasn't defending it. Like I never publicly said, oh, this is a great thing. I was very open and honest, which was breaching my own potentially causing problems in my own contract, because you're not really allowed to badmouth, your own comp. But anyway, that that boiled over, and again, I still think that they have lingering effects from that. And now I'm happy to be with GG Poker, who does things very, very differently.
Sure. Yeah. And I mean, like you saw Larry David and Tom Brady, like shilling for FTX, which obviously turned out to be a complete disaster. I know they took some heat for that. I mean, even Doug, who I know Doug was on the show. I love Doug. He was one of your most outspoken critics, I feel like. And then he got tied up in this whole CoinFlex mess also when they were sponsoring on this podcast. So yeah, it's obviously a hard thing.
What's that saying? You either die a hero or live long enough to become a villain.
Yeah. Exactly. Okay. I want to get to the heads up match with Doug here quickly. I'm sure poker nerds out there know what I'm talking about. Doug had challenged Daniel, not expecting Daniel to accept a very, very high stakes match in Doug's specialty online no limit hold'em. I think Daniel gained a lot of credibility, a ton of credibility in the community by accepting the challenge of Doug eventually to play heads up online. One thing that struck me, and I enjoyed the whole match and following all the saga around it. One thing that struck me was the casual poker world, which Daniel brought in, getting introduced to solvers and balancing ranges and GTO and studying. And while that is cool, and I'm all for trying to elevate the discourse around things that I like poker, on the other hand, I felt like it was somewhat off-putting and intimidating to some people. Like, even me, I'm pretty into poker, but just knowing that if I want to play on these guys' level, I need to be studying computer simulations and memorizing bet sizing spots. It makes me not even really want to play that much anymore, because I'm I'm dead against these guys if I'm not doing that. So any thoughts there about the long-term health of poker and where it's going with all the solver and GTO and people kind of talking above the way it used to be, where it's just like, hey, let's go play some poker, and we were in a bar and it was somewhat fun?
Can totally relate to what you're saying. And I agree with you so much that for the average Joe, like hearing so many people talk about the amount of study required to play at the highest levels is like, okay, ain't nobody got time for that, right? So the question is, can you still succeed and do well without it? And the answer is yes. The only issue is this: like I played him in his comfort place, which is online poker, right? I'm a live player. I never really got into the online poker street. So for me, I had a very short period of time to learn a lot of stuff, because online is data driven, right? It's numbers, and if you're going to play at the high stakes, yeah, you have to really dive in and understand theory at that level. But if you like to play poker and want to win and want to play low stakes or play like live poker, you don't really need, it helps. I will say this: having a theoretical understanding of how the game works and studying game theory can't hurt you. It's going to help you, no question. But is it necessary to be dialed in or do what the computer says in a live scenario? Absolutely not. In fact, I would say that it's actually a mistake. It's a mistake to do that, right? So, for example, a lot of what these kids do now is they'll randomize what they're going to do. They don't base it on the situation. They're like, all right, the GTO simulation said 15% of the time I should do this. So they look at a clock, or they look at their watch, and it says, oh, it's 14. I'm going to do this, right? Yep. So it sort of takes the decision away from them. They're not actually playing the game of poker. They're just playing the math. But actually, that can be suboptimal. For example, let's say, I'm up against old man Bill, right? And old man Bill just bet all of his chips on the river, okay? Well, in theory, I should call here 75% of the time, because I have the right hand to call. And if I do that, it's fine, but it's not the best available option, because you know what? If you're smart and you're paying attention, oh, old man Bill does not bluff here, ever. So forget what the computer says. I'm going to play better than the computer can by exploiting him. Right. So now if Bill figured out, he's like, oh, Daniel folds too much against me and starts bluffing, he could exploit me. Right. But it's very, very difficult for people to change who they are and how they play.
Sure. And in live poker, you get into those spots for sure. I think or maybe I misunderstand the whole thing, but I think what people who study a lot would say is that the inputs are wrong for Bill, right? Like maybe your inputs for Bill's range need to be different, or yeah, I don't know. I guess my point is that, man, it's gotten to a point where I think for people to try to win at reasonable stakes online, like, is just so intimidating, you know? And
well,
so
the thing you were saying with the Bill thing, right? Is like what I'm saying is these people do what is correct in theory, not even thinking about who Bill is or what Bill is. Yeah. There are some people who do what's called node locking, which is you can sort of formulate, okay, if this guy does this, how do I take advantage of that? Yep. But most of the people that are trying to be like theory conscious, if you will, I call them slaves to the sim. Yep. Where like they'll just, whatever the computer tells them to do, they do, even when it's really, really stupid.
Sure. Live poker, you mentioned. It is back, man. I don't know if you've noticed. I don't know how much you've been out there. It is crazy. They're like breaking records, live poker for tournaments. Can't get a table anywhere. Live cash seems like it's booming in a big time as well. I'm not as familiar with what's going on online. You could tell me better if online is booming in the same way. I do think that one obstacle for online is that there's been so much cheating accusations, and when people say cheating, there's all kinds of different forms, right? Like ghosting, someone playing for you, multi-accounting. You know, I have 2 accounts and I'm playing on the same site. I think the worst one, which I don't even know how you would police, is RTA, real-time assistance. Somebody has a chart or a computer program on a computer next to them that's solving stuff for them as they're playing in real time. I feel like that stuff has gone mainstream enough to where it's kind of turning people off from online poker, but maybe I'm wrong. And it's also just such a juxtaposition to me to see online poker booming so hard, and yet I'm still sitting here in the United States. I'm in Colorado. I can't play online poker. So any thoughts on the future of online and all the cheating stuff and anything like that?
Yeah, so that's a good question. And like you said, there are varying degrees of what cheating is. And, you know, like there's, like you said, just telling a friend, hey, you should do this, you should do that, versus like RTA, which stands for real-time assistance, right? Now, the reason this sort of came about where it went public, and I'm proud to say this, is because GG Poker caught them, okay? Because they have algorithms and software to detect whether or not somebody is using the RTA. So the only reason this became a story was because we banned, you know, I think it was 40 to 60 accounts, which we found doing this at on a grand scale. So it's always going to constantly be a fight, you know, in terms of technology, right? Where there's always going to be people that are trying to game a system, try to cheat, try to cut angles. So the organizers and the software providers have to figure out ways to catch them. So it's like a little bit of a cat and mouse game. But I think they do a really, really good job. And online poker is booming. As I just said, GG Poker had an event where they guaranteed 10. I mean, this is a $150 buy-in. There was no rebuys.
And that's without Americans also, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, without Americans, of course.
Right. Yeah, that's crazy. I mean, that's so many people. And yeah, I don't know. I assume that you are incentivized, or GG is at least incentivized, to get online poker back in the United States. A ton of people asked me to ask you, when is online poker coming to XYZ state? I doubt you have any insights there, but the people want it for sure.
Of course. So here's the thing. There's some positive and there's some negative news, right? Positive news is you see some states regulating it, like Nevada, like New Jersey, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Delaware, right? Mm-hmm. So that's good news. Even better news is now they're starting to understand, all right, we have to share liquidity. We have to like use the same player pool. We're still cut off from the rest of the world, but whatever. It's better than nothing. But the bad news is at a federal level, this doesn't rank like in the top 1,000 of issues that anyone there cares about or even understands. I've gone to Sacramento. I explained it to all the politicians. They're like, yeah, we get it. Like, we'd like to, but Sheldon Adelson, who's now passed, he pays my bills, and he said no. Yeah. So I don't think at a federal level you'll ever see it. But what you can hope for is if you get the big states, like if you could get California and New York, like just those two alone, then the others will follow suit. And you know, now you're talking about something. But it is kind of really silly when you think of gambling, right? What is daily fantasy sports? It's gambling, right? So some people gamble with an edge, some don't. Sure. How's that any different than poker? Sure. Right? But fantasy got a carve out and poker didn't. So it's just a lot of shenanigans and stuff. But you know, it is.
Well, I think DFS got themselves, not at first, but eventually got themselves organized enough in the lobbying streets to get it carved out. And that's what poker needs too. I mean, obviously, like, maybe the poker community doesn't have as much money as Sheldon Adelson did, but yeah, few more high stakes golf matches, and maybe you can take a bag up to Sacramento.
Okay.
Oh, David asked. David said, "Does Daniel think he'll ever do another heads up, no limit, or other game match again, like he did against Doug Polk? If yes, who would his potential opponents be? Any interest in another heads up for rolls match that will captivate the poker community?"
I think if I did it again, and so here's the thing, that whole match, a lot of people don't realize this, but like I would have loved to have played it live.
Sure.
Right? Because I think live poker is like a next level of what poker's supposed to be.
It would have taken like 10 years, but yeah.
Exactly the problem. If you want to have any sort of substantial, sample size, it needs to be long. We started the match live. It's a high. We started on Poker Go, the first 500 hands, and I was nicely ahead, 130,000. Thinking like, ooh, baby. And then we moved to online poker, and I got smacked pretty good. But I don't have any plans to do anything like that. I do think it'd be fun to, create some more heads up tournaments and things like that. But yeah, this is what I was going to get to. The whole reason I accepted was because I thought we were under the impression, at least at GG, that we could play on the software somehow. Like we could play this match on GG. And GG Poker was just starting out, and I really wanted to, sort of put it on the map and have everybody talking about it. So I thought, playing this match would get all the eyeballs, and they could see the software and how awesome it is and things like that. Push came to shove. We're both in Nevada. There was no real legal way we could get that done. I thought maybe we could, but I already agreed, right? So I can't be like, yeah, you remember what I said I'd play? Nah, I changed my mind. now I was sort of stuck in it. I'm like, shit, I guess I got to put in some work. And, obviously I got a lot better as time went on, but I didn't have enough time, really, to be honest. Like I had 4 weeks of prep time when, truthfully, most people would need 3 to 5 years. If I had 6 months, I'd be very, very happy to have it. And I feel like I could do well because I already have a substantial amount of knowledge on the game. But 4 weeks was like, I'm pretty dead.
For sure. Okay, last thing I want to get to before listening questions is the YouTube stuff. So, YouTube, people don't realize, I think, is a game that has to be played in an optimal manner. We've been working on it really hard and trying to grow our YouTube in a organic way. You clearly have put a ton of effort, and I guess Christian as well has put a ton of effort into your YouTube channel. You also let people into your personal life with the vlogs around the World Series, show your family and stuff like that. I guess my question is why, first of all, and what has any fallout of the YouTube stuff been, positive or negative?
So YouTube, this is funny because I sort of did daily diaries here and there way back when people had there's no cell phones. It was like the big, huge camera, and they had to edit or whatever. And I remember just like early on in YouTube posting a few things here and there. And then it obviously started to gain some traction and my videos were starting to get, noticed. And I didn't care. I wasn't even monetizing the channel. I just didn't care about that. And I wouldn't have monetized the channel. I thought eventually what it would be good for is sort of promoting things that I'm involved in, like GG Poker, or Poker Go, whatever the case may be. Not really, again, not even monetizing. But then, I had Christian come on and sort of take over running the channel because I didn't really run anything. I just put videos out with no real plan. And he's like, we could get this out more. And he said, one of the things we'd have to change, which I didn't realize, is try to understand the YouTube algorithm is difficult. Like I don't know anything about it. But when you monetize videos, they push them more.
Yep.
I didn't know that. So we monetized them, not because I needed the like $18 from the video that I would get, but so that, they would prioritize them and get them out to more people. And that worked. And then Christian decided, that he wanted to take on a bigger role with it. And he's like, oh, let's create some content that's steady, and then, cause like, listen, I pay him, for golf, but we ain't golfing right now.
Yep.
So this is an opportunity for him to sort of, make some money on the side. But yeah, for me, I use it as sort of like a advertising marketing vehicle.
Sure.
A way to give back, if you will. But it isn't something I look at and go, ooh, I could make a lot of money on YouTube.
Yeah. Well, yeah, for sure. And you see in the comments, I mean, there's so many people, like Weekend Warriors, they're out there playing 1-2 and like they love watching Daniel's vlogs from playing high stakes tournaments and stuff like that. The thing for me, and I thought about vlogging actually, and like I get uncomfortable with it to some degree, but I played the 25K at the World Series last year and I was like, this would be really cool. People would be really into it. People are into high stakes stuff. Like you should come. I should vlog it, right? I should bring a little camera like Daniel does and vlog it. I didn't want to be distracted while I was playing a 25K. I also didn't want to have to like defend myself. Like if I want to fucking 4-bet this guy because I don't like his face, I want to be able to do it. I don't have to defend it to a bunch of people on the internet. And so I decided not to vlog it. Does any of that cross your mind while you're vlogging and playing? Man, this is distracting. Man, I don't feel like doing this right now. I don't want to defend what I want to do right here, even if I think that it's thin or outside the box or whatever.
Well, I'm glad you shared that because what you made as a decision, I think, was correct then, right? Because if you didn't want to be distracted, it can be, and if you didn't want to worry about being held accountable, if you will, by the public, then it's another reason to not do that. Because if it affects your decision making, where you're like, oh man, how am I going to explain this one? Instead of just going with what you think makes sense. For me, I like it because I look at it like a brain dump in a lot of ways. Like some people journal, where you write in a journal in the morning, and then you brain dump at night all the thoughts that you have, right? For me, I play a hand or whatever, and then I have to go through it. And I have to explain my thought process. And sometimes it's like, you know what? Made a mistake, right? So I can do that in the moment. I'm not worried. I don't care about the flack when people say you screwed this up. I'm like, I know better than you. And sometimes people think I made a mistake, and I'm like, I didn't. It's a play that made sense to me, and I would do it again, even though I lost or it didn't work. So I have a lot of confidence in myself in that regard. But I do find, for me, the vlogging isn't very taxing because all I do is I use a phone, right? And I have a little phone and a selfie stick. Sometimes I throw against the wall if things go poorly. And I just shoot what I shoot, right? And then it uploads to a cloud. And then Christian and a team in Korea, they edit it, and it's up the next morning, which I think is really, really relevant and important now with the world we live in, right? Nobody wants to watch a vlog that was like 3 weeks ago when they already know the outcome, right? But I also, during this phase, like on pokerstake.com, I sell pieces of myself so people can be along on the journey, where you can put $20 in and ride it with me, right? So imagine betting on sports or betting on a guy, and now every day you can sweat him through these 20 to 30 minute videos that I do in my vlog on YouTube every day. And it's really become sort of a staple for a lot of people's viewing experience at the World Series.
Yeah, I assume you'll do it at this year's World Series again.
Yeah, no, I'm looking forward to it. Yeah, I mean, I'm looking forward to this year. And last year's vlogs were like the most insane we've ever had because I had some crazy shit happen. I had some random person from Lake Havasu telling me that I left a secret family back there. He wants $1 million or he's going to go public with it. I had another weird tinfoil hat woman say that I came up and pushed her. When
I saw that one, yeah.
And she was over there following me, right? But it's like we live in a society where if I didn't have the camera, who knows? So we had there's a lot of bizarre shit that happened at this year's World Series, a little drama that people, could tune in for daily.
Yeah. Well, listen, if you're living a credible, within integrity life, you should have a camera on you at all times. Sounds like when you're as famous as you are, people come up with these accusations. You hit them with the camera, say, no, not true. All right. You guys got in a lot of questions. I want to get to as many as I can here. Appreciate everyone who sent in questions for Daniel. Question 1 from David Dubia. He says, how badly does Daniel want to throat punch Phil Hellmuth? Now, this is a nuanced topic because I do think that Phil Hellmuth has been generally good for poker. Do I think the way he berates people at the table is good for poker? No, but obviously you've played a lot with Phil, known him for a long time. Do you actually want to throat punch him sometimes? David is asking.
Never. To me, he's funny, right? And I think the key thing with people is like, you just can't take him seriously, right? He's a character. I mean, that's who he is, but he's just sort of a character. It's not even like, it's just so bizarre. Like the things that he'll say, the things that he's constantly bragging about, unprompted, he just is a unique individual, and watching him get upset or like lose is fun. Like I appreciate anybody, whether you like him or not, that move the needle, right? And he does. Like some people tune in because they want to see him lose. Yeah. Some people tune in because they love him. They love the antics. It's a lot better than watching just like people stare at the wall for 30 seconds and then go like that. So Phil's, he's an interesting character. I don't want to throw punch him. I think he's good for poker overall. Again, because I think like characters are what matter.
Question 2 is from All In Mike. He says, I'm getting back into poker after a long hiatus. What is the biggest differences in play of opponents today compared to the poker boom of the early 2000s? I'm sure you get this question all the time. Obviously, a ton has changed in poker. But yeah, if someone's getting back into it today after 15 years out of the game, what would you say the biggest differences are?
I would say that the gap between what used to be like what we called the fish, the really bad players, and then like the pros, it's gotten a little smaller. I think most people who get into the game now have some idea of how to play. They're all right, I got to raise, and they've watched enough where they can sort of copy. They might not obviously execute as well as the top pros, but I would say that's probably the biggest difference. It's not as simple as just like sit there, be what we call a nit, wait for aces, and you're going to get some dummy to just give you all his money. It's a little more nuanced than that.
Sometimes when I was watching you play during like the boom, and I was playing this, like trying to play at least a really aggressive style that I think a lot of, like younger, thoughtful people were playing, were like, hey, like I'm opening up every pot, I'm 3-betting, I'm 4-betting, I'm 5-betting. You would play, especially in some of these like World Series events, play this, I think you called it small ball style, which I don't study at all to know if this is true, but I feel like when I play against these like Euros who are solver bros now, they're kind of doing what you were doing back then, where like small bets on the flop and calling a ton. They're not 3 and 4 betting nearly as much. So like if somebody coming back to the game now, 15 years later, I feel like it's almost a small ball approach that a lot of these guys are playing now. Would you agree there? And any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I would say that my approach was ahead of its time. And it's funny because at the time you'd have the sort of the consensus opinion being what I'm doing is incorrect, right? And then they find after using solvers, they're like, oh no, Daniel was right the entire time. And what I'm talking about is smaller raise sizes, right? Playing, a pot control style. And the other aspect is, for example, if you only have something like 11 big blinds and someone raises your big blind, there used to be this idea that you had to just raise or fold, right? Move all in or fold. Oh, you got to move in or fold with like Jack 10 offsuit. I'm like, no, how about I call? If I flop a Jack or a 10, let's go. If not, I'll move on and keep the 9 big blinds. So a lot of sort of the theories and the bet sizing things that I sort of created from my own mind have been sort of confirmed now, that solvers and computers go, oh, what he was doing was right. And I think it's always worthwhile as far as poker to not be a sheep and just do what everybody else is doing. Because especially with tournaments, the guys who succeed, the guys or girls who succeed the most are typically ones that go against the grain. Where you're like, what they're doing is crazy wrong. I'm like, okay, well then why is it working, right? Maybe there's something that you're missing.
Yeah, no, for sure. That makes sense. I always thought that you were kind of doing it because like the people that you face in a World Series main event table, like there's no reason to be super aggressive and get it in, 60% or something like that. But if you're playing a 25K at Aria with 30 people, maybe you'd be more like, it's more correct to try to push smaller edges.
Yeah, no question. You make the most obvious point, which is that when I'm playing against really bad players, I'm going to take much less risk because I don't need to. I'll find better spots, if you will. But if you're playing against bosses who are all really, really good, you have to take every spot. If you're, 1% edge here, that's how you're going to succeed in this thing. You can't afford to wait for like the right spot because it's just not going to show up often.
Question 3 from Aaron. He says, in the last 20 years, what was the lowest point of Daniel's poker career? Did you think of hanging it up? Any low points in the last 20 years you want to talk about?
Not really, no. I mean, I've been pretty consistent throughout my career. I think in the year 2000, I probably experienced what I needed to, which was just like I got money in 1999 after working hard. And then I just was living the Vegas life, golfing, go play some poker, drink some wine, drink some whiskey. No, not whiskey, drink some vodka, just like be drunk and then play poker and lose and who cares. And then by the end of that year, I had no money left, right? Despite building up a big bankroll. And it was sort of a wake-up call that, I'd have to take this seriously. I can't just be all loosey-goosey eating a sandwich at the table. No, I had to take it seriously. And so that was like pivotal. Like I'm a big believer in this. Whatever it is you do, that like mistakes are valuable. Like making mistakes in life are super valuable if you actually learn from them, right? I look at like what you call breakdowns as an opportunity for a real breakthrough, right? So that year of 2000, I did everything wrong, right? But guess what? Because I did that, I don't do that anymore. Because I actually said to myself, that's wrong. And I know I don't do it occasionally or anything. It's just I've rectified the path of the ship.
Maybe along those same lines, question 4 from Kenny says, how do you handle long losing streaks? Do you recommend the same to amateurs or aspiring sharp players? How do you handle long losing streaks? Asks Kenny.
That's very, very difficult for most people, right? And poker is a game where resilience is required. I went through a really bad streak for about 2 years, just not this year, but like the year before and whatever. Like I was like, holy shit, every time I'm all in and stuff is out of my control, I just keep losing no matter what I have. And it was crazy and it can happen and it can mess with your mind. So what you need to do in those moments is be introspective about, okay, is it luck or is it me? Am I missing things? There's no value in really focusing on how, you're a victim to circumstance. There's only value in starting to like fine tuning everything else. Right. And for some people, it's going to require a break. Like just take a moment away from the table and sort of reset your bound. If you're going to the table and you're feeling anxious already when you first sit down, you're not in the right mindset to play. Sure. So you have to wait until you're actually feeling good about your game.
Question 5 from Michael. He says, Daniel watches some good competition shows that my wife and I also watch. Curious if Daniel and Amanda have stumbled into the phenomenon that is MILF Manor. I don't even know if this guy's joking, if this is a real show, but he's asking if you've seen MILF Manor because he knows you like these competition shows.
I just heard of MILF Manor from someone else the other day. I'm not watched it. I don't even know the concept. My latest competition show, and it's so freaking funny and bizarre. It's like it's called Physical 100 on Netflix, and it's Korean.
Yeah.
Everybody's Korean, but they have subtitles.
Yeah.
And there's like these English people who go, "Oh wow, you have a great body. Oh, you must eat a lot of grilled chicken. Oh, you work out." And it's just the hair. Wow. It's so funny. But the concept is really awesome. And I imagine, the Americans will steal it because the Koreans know how to do reality TV.
Yeah, I watch that show with my kids. They love it too. The Physical 100 show. 2 more here. Question 6 from Bobby. He says, ask Daniel what he thought your equity, meaning my equity, was in that 25K WSOP event. So I actually put this on Twitter and a bunch of people responded. I'm curious what you think. It sounds like other people are too. I have barely played poker in the last 3 years. I had some background where I had played a bunch of live cash, never above 10 and a quarter. Though, what would my markup or markdown be in the 25K WSOP event? Which, by the way, I should tell the people, this is not a normal WSOP 20. This is not a normal 25K. It got 360 runners or something completely ridiculous like that for the 25K. But anyways, what would you make my markup or markdown more likely?
That's a good question, but it's also absolutely an impossible question for me to answer, right? It's like, I have no idea how you play, never played with you. I understand what your background is a little bit, but without actually having any experience, in terms of like seeing your decision-making and stuff like that, I would just be throwing a dart at a wall, right? Yeah. Now, I would say this, the only way I can answer the question, is it possible you're plus EV? Absolutely, because like you said, the field was, abundant with like a lot of players. Oh, yeah. Now, I can say with decent amount of confidence that if you played in one of these 35, 40 player fields in the 25Ks with your not playing in 3-4 years, and you're probably not plus EV. Who knows? But obviously your chances increase at the World Series of Poker when you got 300 people. But yeah, I wouldn't know enough about you to say plus or minus.
Yeah, something like, I think Sean Deeb said like 0.75 or something, which I thought was a little too low. I thought something like 0.85 or something was probably closer to right. And after seeing the field, I actually thought that maybe 0.9 was closer to right. But yeah, clearly a dog to a lot of these, most of the field. All right, last question from BTC Bash. He says, would love to hear you guys discuss bathroom strategy etiquette stories during live tournament poker breaks. I have a feeling Daniel has seen some things. Now, if you watch the vlogs, now Daniel has his own room / RV situation. He doesn't go with the peons into the bathroom, which is absolutely disgusting. The bathroom at the Rio, I swear, was the worst smelling thing I've ever been in my entire life. It's a little bit better now over at Bally's and Paris. But yeah, it's a total zoo during these bathroom breaks. Any stories? And I guess you hated it so much you had to get the RV situation going.
No, so at the Rio, I understand that for people like you and whatever, and the peons, as you say, had it rough in those long bathroom lines. But I had an RV parked right outside that I could walk to in like less than a minute. And I had my own bathroom, and I could have, I had my own kingdom in there, and it was a really nice place I could relax and stuff. Now, we moved to Bally's in Paris, and I really wanted to have an RV there, but there was just no place to put it. So instead, I have like a private room, and then there's some good and bad about this, but I am now forced to use the bathroom with the peons.
Oh, baby.
So I'm in there. But the good news is there are a lot of bathrooms. There's more bathrooms, and they're bigger. So there are times where you're like, all right, there's 12 stalls, and like 3 of them don't have shit plugged in them. But like, my strategy typically, part of it I can't share. But yeah, it's sort of changed and evolved now that we're at Bally's Paris.
It's got to be crazy for you too. Like, you're in the bathroom in line, all these people are like, "Oh, there's Daniel Negreanu. Let's go say hi." He's waiting to.
The worst is I'm holding my dick, and the guy's like, "Can I get a picture?" I'm like, "What?" He was like, "Really?"
All right. Well, thanks so much for being here, Daniel. Obviously, most people listening to this are in America, but if they're not, I assume you want to tell them to play on GG Poker. Anything else you want to tell the people about where to find you, how to find you, anything else you're working on?
Yeah, well, obviously, my most active on Twitter, Real Kid Poker, and of course, the YouTube channel. We're cranking out the Super High Rollerball series that I won, and I'm sort of doing a breakdown of the entire thing. Christian's putting that together, and then it won't be too long before we're back in WSOP vlog territory on the YouTube channel. So check that out, subscribe, and all that stuff you're supposed to do. I don't know.
All right. Thanks so much to Daniel for being on the show. We'll be back later this week with Silva to talk some NFL free agency. For Daniel. For Christian, thanks so much for putting this together. For producer Luke, I am Adam. Good luck, everybody.